Hey, welcome to the Wow Embossing Powder YouTube channel and blog. I'm Verity from the creative team and welcome back. Today I have a really interesting and different project for myself, though there might be quite a lot of mixed media artists out there that really enjoy this as it is anyway. But I want to show a way of a card maker incorporating this into some more mixed media project, and also showing that you as a card maker can also replicate this on your cards but using ink instead. So today I'm creating this really funky abstract background with a bit of heat embossing using my acrylic paints. So for this I have a canvas board which is about an A2 card size or a postcard size, and I'm also using some of my Liquitex acrylics. These are the basic set and there's about 48 in this, and I recently purchased them for myself as I really start to get into some acrylic painting. So I'm selecting a variety of different colours from the set, and I will list the colours that I use on the blog. If you're interested in any of the particular colours, you'll find them there over on the blog. And I bring out quite a lot, but I don't use all the ones that you can see on screen at the moment. So this is a really easy abstract background. I'm paring it down, it's going really simple, so you can easily use this in your card making, but using coloured inks instead. Create a lovely blended background and then ink swipe over the top. So I'm just getting myself ready, and I've got a tear off palette here just to put the paints down, and I'm using quite a wide flat brush. I'll have the size of the brush in the blog as well, so if you're interested in those sizes. Now I'm first of all just applying the ink directly to the board because I want to create first of all a blended background. So there's no point wasting any of my paint on the palette just yet. I decided to use the palette as a bit of a base to protect my glass mat. Now even if I got the acrylic on there, it wouldn't have been the end of the world because I could easily wipe it off, as acrylics are water based. So on a non-porous surface such as glass, I could then clean it off quite easily. So I start off with sort of a primary blue, phthalo blue to begin with, and add this at the top. And then I'm going to go in and start blending. Now I alternate the colours a little bit, so I'm going for a bit more of a paler blue, a bit more of a baby blue. And I'm just cleaning my brush off and then drying my brush because I don't really want to add a lot of water. Now it's really important when I'm adding the paint that I am putting it on next to the colour I want to blend and making sure that I'm doing it quite quickly, as in the paint hasn't had time to dry, because to get that smooth blend I need both paints to be wet to be able to blend that lighter blue up into the darker blue. I'm then going in for sort of a purple colour, and this is quite a bright purple. Now you don't see this as much later on in the video. I do blend colours into it quite a bit, but I'm just showing you that there is a variety of different colours in this background. This actually blends really nicely into that light blue, and you get a really lovely transition. Again, each time I'm going between my colours, I'm just washing it off and then drying my brush off because I don't really want to add too much water to the actual board because it's going to water the colour down and not give a very nice thick consistency. I'm just painting the edges and getting rid of any excess colour as well, just with my paintbrush. I'm not too bothered about the sides, but if you are, you might want to sort of tape them off perhaps. I then put a cobalt blue down at the bottom. So this is a really blue colour scheme, and I love blues, so I had so much fun just experimenting with all the different colours. As I said, this is cobalt blue, which is a beautiful blue, and this blends really nicely up into the dioxazine purple that I used. Now, because the end is still wet and I don't want to get my fingerprints in it, I just use a post-it note just to rest my fingers on the acrylic board, just so that I can hold it in place and it wouldn't move about too much. But at the same time, I wasn't going to get paint on my fingers, which I might later on transfer to the board, and also wouldn't actually leave any prints in the paint. So as I said, I did use that blue, and that blended up quite a lot into the purple, so it overtook the purple a little bit, but you still get a bit of a hint of that purple come through. And then lastly, I've gone in with a turquoise. This is a really lovely light green turquoise as opposed to a more blue turquoise, and that blends into that really nicely. So once I'd created the background, I wanted to dry it, and Wow Embossing Powder has two heat settings. So the heat setting 2 is a much more slower heat setting, and this is really good for drying with mixed media projects and perfect for drying your acrylic paints. If you're impatient like me and you cannot wait for this to dry naturally and you just want to move on to the next part of your project, then why not get your Wow Embossing Powder tool out, use heat setting 1 and just give it a dry. As I say, it's a slower speed than the heat setting 1, which is much better when you're doing your heat embossing, because you want to melt that powder quickly, reduce your warpage. So once I had dried this off, I was then going to start adding some more abstract elements to the background. So I'm using a selection of colours again, and I'm just using varying sizes of paintbrushes to add strokes of paint to the card. Now I'm purposely going in different directions. I'm also adding light colours over darker colours to give a bit more contrast, and I really was just having a bit of fun really with this. And I think with abstract paintings, my opinion, I'm a complete beginner with acrylic paints and painting, so I'm not an expert, but I don't see why you can't have fun with a bit of abstract painting. As I said, I'm using different coloured paints to add to the background, varying the size at which those paints are added to the background as well, because that gives a little bit more interest. I'm going in with some really sort of turquoisey blue, and at times I did add a bit more to the top because I felt like draw in some of the colours that were used in the background with these abstract paint strokes, but there wasn't enough turquoise at the top of the card really for you to connect it with the turquoise at the bottom, so I did add a little bit more to the top and blended it out. And then going in with a bit more of a darker turquoise, I'm overlapping some of the paint strokes and paintbrush strokes just to give it a little bit more interest, and I really had fun. And I think that's the main thing, is it not? I also used a thinner paintbrush just to add some thin lines, just to intersect some of those thick brushes, and it just gives a little bit more variation. So to now add some embossing powder to this, the Wow Embossing Powder company have a great tool called the Mixed Media Brush. This is a bit like a nail polish brush in a little tube of embossing ink. So it's so easy to use. I mean, if you paint your nails, you know how to use one of these brushes. And it's great because you can add your embossing ink to any position on your card, on your project, on your 3D object, and you can add embossing powder or glitter to it and really transform your project. So now, to begin with, although it comes with a brush in itself, I used a brush that I had that was thinner to add some embossing powder. I wanted a thin line. Now this is a brush that I'm not too fussed about that gets ruined. I'm not planning on using it for acrylics. I'm not planning on using it for my watercolours. I will keep this paintbrush to the side just to use with the embossing ink. And once I've added that line, I can then cover it with embossing powder, because obviously we've got that embossing ink, it's sticky, your embossing powder is going to stick to it. So I just add that over the top. If I've got any excess anywhere, then I can just use a spare brush just to wipe it off. Do bear in mind, if your background isn't dry, you may get a lot of powder sticking to the actual acrylic paint as well. If there's part of your design that you do not want to emboss, make sure it's dry. Just use your embossing tool again just to dry that off. So once I've covered it with the powder, I can then heat set it and you get that lovely, gorgeous embossed gold shine. Now, what I did was I then started adding more of these strokes, mimicking some of the paint strokes that I'd already used with my acrylic paints. I used a combination of my paintbrush as well as the actual mixed media brush just to give a variety of different sizes, again mimicking those paintbrush strokes I did with my acrylic paints. Once I'd added a selection of those paintbrushes, covered them in with embossing powder, I would then heat set them all in one go. So I would heat set quite a few, then have a look at it and decide, did I want to add some more, where I needed a bit more gold just to add a little bit more interest. And I don't think it can ever get boring watching embossing powder melt, no matter whether it is a card, mixed media project or something else. Now, as I said, you could incorporate this on your card making. If you're not into mixed media, you're not into painting, acrylics, you could easily do this with your cards. You could do this with inks. Create an ink blended background, then use your ink pads, small mini pads, to swipe across the card front to make those abstract motions, and then use the paintbrush and use the mixed media brush to then add some brush strokes in your embossing powder. Heat set, and then you can use that as a beautiful background for your cards. Now I wanted to finish this painting off. I just wanted to add, it needed a little something, and I decided it needed a sentiment. And I found this sentiment from Altenew, and it says, "Always be a dreamer," which I thought was really lovely. I really like that thought, and with this background being quite abstract, have something that doesn't necessarily need a focal image to it to have the sentiment. So I can heat emboss the sentiment onto this. Now I'm using my MISTI because I don't want to ruin my sentiment at the last minute and ruin the actual painting, but I just removed the foam pad out of my MISTI because my board is quite thick. It doesn't need that support from the foam pad. I can then position it down, pick the sentiment up with my MISTI door, then use my anti-static powder just over the top because I really want to make sure there is no wet residue from the ink or the acrylic paint before I heat emboss the sentiment. I do not want any particles just catching a little bit of wet paint, and then I can stamp it in embossing ink and cover it with bright opaque white embossing powder. This just really pops off that background, the white contrasting with those vibrant purples, greens, blues and turquoises. So I hope you really enjoyed this project. I had so much fun making it. It was so easy and I just love it. What kind of new technique do you think you're going to try in the new year? For me, I'm certainly going to be doing a lot more acrylic. If you enjoyed this technique, just leave a comment in the description box below, as I'd love to know what you think. If you're not a subscriber already, why not think about hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell icon to be notified when the next video is up. If you can give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. And until next time, happy crafting!